Thank you, Aurora, and thanks for inviting me to give this talk. I think I will give you a brief overview of what's out there and how you can get it, hopefully. So identifying funding sources, right? Why bother? As Melina told you, it's important. If you don't have money, it's hard to do research or to continue research that you may be doing. It provides you the means to do it, and it's important for your viability as a researcher. If research is something that really excites you and drives you, it's a passion of yours, you need to do this. Because the way the system is structured currently, to be able to be allowed to spend time in research, you have to account for that. Somebody needs to pay for your time. And some of that money can come through funding. So it should be one of your first steps when you consider a research project, right? If you look at the available funding that exists, it hasn't really changed much, and most of it actually comes from industry. Some of the funding actually is on the decline, given the financial issues that we are facing in this country. So the process is becoming more and more competitive. There's a number of funding sources. Some are internal or departmental at your institution. The federal government obviously is one big source. State may have sources. There are some national societies like SAGES. I'll give you some more details. Industry, as I mentioned, accounts for about 60% of the funding that is being granted in the US. But there's also some charitable organizations that offer funding for research. When you look at the internal departmental resources, most of them are small amounts of money, but their intention is to act as seed money. So essentially provide you with the opportunity to do a project that you can then use to jump to a higher grant, submit to a bigger source that can provide you with more resources and money. They're relatively easier to get because the competition is known, right? It's internal at your institution. You know who they are, and they typically target young investigators. Again, these are to help you generate some pilot data to be able to go to the next step. One other aspect of these grants, of course, is that you cannot really tap into them multiple times, typically, just because of why they're there, to help you get jump-started. You could potentially tap them again if you go into a different type of research and you want to start a new research line, but it's not something you can keep going back and back. They're not intended to continuously provide you with funding to do research. They're intended to give you a jump start. So federal funding, obviously the NIH is is the biggest federal agency that provides funds, but there's definitely other funding agencies, and some of them kind of belong into the same, they go under the same umbrella. HRQ is an agency that has received, I think, more attention, and it has become more relevant to some of our needs because it's patient safety related. It's more specific to some of the things. If you are involved in patient safety, it is something that is very relevant, and you can find areas that will fit your needs. The Department of Defense oftentimes has grants that many times they're not just targeting military, also civilians can apply to them, and actually some of their calls for proposals target civilians because they want to have non-military personnel do those grants. There's the Department of Health and Human Services, the Veteran Affairs, and several others. If you look at the list of NIH sections, it's long. This is not intended to be memorized. It's just to show you that there's a lot of them, and each of them targets a different area. So you need to really understand what is the area that you're trying to become or create some research to target the appropriate agency, because if you target the wrong agency, you won't go farther. So the federal funding, typically it's characterized by large amounts of funding, they're very prestigious academically because institutions like them, they get an overhead that comes with the money that is awarded to you, and that helps a lot of institutions build research infrastructure and maintain it. So this is why they really want them. But they're very competitive. They can allow you to supplement your time, they protect time. Essentially, typically what happens is you specify an effort, which is based on a 40-hour week. Since you're all surgeons, most likely the 40 hours translates a little differently, but nevertheless, the 40 hours a week is something that you have. This is how you calculate your effort. So if you're going to spend 1 day a week, essentially that's 20% of your time, and this is how you calculate your effort. So as I said, they're very competitive and they require significant preparation. Melina gave you some really good tips of how to do this, but you definitely need to prepare your grant, have people read it, analyze it, get back to you, and do the best you can to avoid mistakes. Typically, reviewers look for those mistakes, and then once they find a mistake, then they start breaking it down. So your goal is to avoid making any mistakes, so they cannot get caught in one of them and start the negative thinking. The types of grants that are available are the R series. That's typically the biggest grants. There are also career development awards, the K series. There's for training and fellowships, TNF series. There's some other grants available as well. There's the SBIR, which is small business grants. So if you're in the field of trying to develop some type of instrument or device or create a small business, there's funding actually that's available that can be given and acquired. So how do you apply? Typically, there are requests for proposals or for applications. There's different names assigned to them, as you can see, but essentially a governmental agency comes out with a request and says, because typically they have a problem, like a gap that was mentioned earlier, and they try to get researchers to do some studies to address that problem. So as long as the problem that you're interested in coincides with those problems they're looking to address, that's really a great fit. And that's what you should be looking for, because you may write the best proposal. If it's not really what these agencies are looking for, you won't go as far as another proposal that may not be as good as yours, but it's in the heart of what they want. And this is something important to consider and understand. You can also submit an unsolicited application, but those go through a different pathway and they're harder to get. Typically, there's an electronic system that you can submit your application through. There's a lot of researchers that are signed up in the system and a lot of institutions. This is the website that you can go and get that information. The funding sources by state, they vary. It depends where you are. You may want to investigate that in your state. The amounts vary and the availability may also be fairly limited. A couple of examples is the Florida Biomedical Research Program and the North Carolina Biotechnology Center, which frequently have calls for proposals. And this is a website that you can get to. I can provide those slides if you request them. Industry, typically it's investigator-initiated studies. So you want to do something and then you apply and you send your idea to an industry partner. These grants generally are easier to get and they do not require as extensive writing as typically other grants do. But of course they're less prestigious and there's concerns for bias, and I'll show you some data in a moment. The relatively new advanced guidelines, which essentially define what presents conflict, make it a little harder, and it's become a lot harder to get funds, research funds directly to individuals, just because of those conflict of interest issues. And I mentioned that about 60% is obtained through industry. National societies, as the SAGES, typically small amounts for funding that also is essentially its objective is to provide you seed money to get to the next level of your career, obtain some bigger grants. They're prestigious because they are fairly competitive depending on which organization it may be, but at least in our experience, the grants that we receive, and over time, we've seen a significant improvement in the quality of the grants we receive, which has been great, and we feel we are part of this, and Rory has played a significant role in this, being the chair of the committee for several years, and Karen was before there as well. So I think we feel that we have really helped our membership to get better grant writing. There may be too much work for too little money, I have to say, but it is a great opportunity to learn, because if you really have to put a lot of work into this, similar work that you maybe have to put in an NIH grant, but typically this is for when you start your career, when you really learn, you can learn from your mistakes, and it's an excellent source to start, because you do get a lot of good feedback that you can learn from, and as Melina said, this is the most important aspect. Make sure you do pay attention to the feedback you get, because that's the only way you're going to get better. It's like everything else in life. It's like every aspect of surgery. The more you do something, the better you get at it. But learn from the process, learn from the feedback that is provided to you. There's a lot of societies that offer grants. This is not intended for you to be able to read it. It's just intended to say that there's a lot of different places that you can go to obtain this type of grants. SAGES is one of them, and SAGES has every year awards several grants. There is an award ceremony this lunch that they will be announced, and they're open to all SAGES members, or even if you're candidate members. And actually, one of the criteria would try to encourage young investigators to apply for them, because again, this is all about learning how to do it best. Up to $30,000 are available, typically for one-year grants. Approximately 6 competitive grants are awarded per year. That may vary year by year, but I think we rarely have gone below 6. We typically are 6 or over. You are required to submit updates every 6 months, and you are required, if you get one, to present them at SAGES and also to publish in surgical endoscopy. The aims, we also have the SAGES Career Development Award, which aims to provide funding for a young surgeon or surgeon in training to take some time off and do something that really will improve their career. It's about $60,000 to support travel, salary, and tuition, and is for all SAGES members and candidate members, but typically for the younger ones. Charitable organizations, several available. Again, you have to find something that interests them to be able to get something. So I mentioned about the influence of funding source on study outcomes, and there's at least 3 studies that demonstrate that if industry funds research, typically the research tends to be a little biased towards positive outcomes for the devices or the medications that the research represent, that the industry is sponsoring. So the first steps: investigate how do you go about this? Find the local resources in your institution. Ask your grants and contracts office who is it, what is available, how can they help you. Ask other colleagues of yours who have research expertise and experience for input. Search the internet. Nowadays it's very easy to do. Go even on Google and you'll find a wealth of information on grant resources and search engines. Look up funding support on published papers, something that interests you, it's in your domain. Pull up a paper that you really like, see where they got their funding. Do your homework. That's the most important thing. There's different research strategies, the subject approach related to your specific field, which agencies fund your particular area, the type of support, etc. But generally the tips, the good funders, researching the good funders takes time, but is worth spend. Do not focus on an ideal funder. Diversify, so look at several, because one may not like it, somebody else may like it. I'm finishing. Be realistic in your expectations. Make sure the funding agency's requirements are appropriate for your proposal, and research prior grants awarded and grantees. So if you look at grants that are being awarded, for example, by SAGES, you get an idea what typically is being funded. And make sure you follow, Melina mentioned this, the funding agency instructions. If you're way off or even a little off, typically that's going to be a turn-off and you won't go farther. So make sure you avoid the crocodiles that are waiting for you. Here are some electronic resources that you can go to and get some more information. Thank you for listening, and you can email me if you like the slides. Thank you.